You are listening to Film vs. Analytics, a Fantasy Points podcast where each day we discuss a new rookie based on the Dynasty ADP, battling them out, film versus analytics. I am your host, Brett Whitefield, the film expert, and I will be joined by Scott Barrett, the analytics beast. We are Fantasy Points.
What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
Scott, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good, man. What's going on?
Good. I'm just in a good mood. We got the Travis Hunter one out of the way a week ago or whatever, and I'm just ready to move forward. We're just, I'm in this for the long haul now. We're going to get to some fun wide receivers, some tight ends, some running backs. Got a lot on the docket here.
My rookie wide receiver article, 15,500 words dropping this week. So I'm excited about that. Running back, probably a week away.
Am I going to get to do a preview before that drops?
You can.
I would love to. Speaking of which, if you guys are interested by the things you hear today, be sure to check out the Fantasy Points YouTube channel, subscribe, and turn notifications on. We have a bunch of film versus analytics already out there. We've done most of this wide receiver class. We're going to finish it up here in the next couple episodes. But today we are talking about the Iowa State bros, Jayden Higgins and Jaylin Noel. Scott, I like both of these guys. Where should we start, my friend?
Well, yeah, that's the thing is like, you don't have to have a favorite. You don't have to. You could just like both of them. You don't have to say one stinks and the other's great. But I think there is going to be a disagreement. But on the whole, we like both of these guys. But yeah, so you put me on them first, and I'll be honest. I think it's trickier for an analytics bro to get this right than a film bro, and I'll dive into that sort of nuance. But yeah, so why don't you lead us off this time?
Okay, cool. So we're talking two guys today. So I'm going to give you 4-1-1 on my wide receiver 3, Jaylin Noel, and then I'll double back for the 4-1-1 on Jayden Higgins, and then I'll pass it back to you. Does that work?
Sounds good.
All right. Let's do it. Jaylin Noel, my wide receiver 3 in the class. I have compared him stylistically to a souped up version of Amon-Ra St. Brown. When you look at the way they're used, the way they project to the NFL, very similar. First and foremost,
that's lofty. And you had a round 2 grade on Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah, it was like right there on the fringe. It's like a top 38 grade or something. Yeah. First and foremost, first thing I wrote about Jaylin Noel in his prospect guide write-up, athletic profile that lacks nothing. And this is true. The second you put on the tape, you see a guy with incredible linear explosiveness, but he also has mouth-watering change of direction skills. You see a body control that is elite. Pretty much every single thing you'd want from an athleticism standpoint, he has in droves. Now, is he the best in any one category? Maybe not. But he's close to elite in just about every single way the human body moves. On top of that, I love the guy's attitude and demeanor. And I'm going to get to some of the stuff we see on the field in a second. But when I talked to Jaylin Noel in Mobile, just talking to him reminded me of Amon-Ra St. Brown. Has this ridiculous, confident air about him. I even asked him if he could go toe-to-toe with Amon-Ra in the weight room. And he said, not only will I go toe-to-toe, I'll beat him. I'm the pound-for-pound strongest guy on Iowa State. I love this mentality in a wide receiver, Scott. These guys are normally kind of nutty as it is. And if you're going to be nutty, confident, and competent, I love this, man. But on the field, man, I see an explosive, snappy route runner. It's interesting because in that Iowa State offense, and I'm sure your data points are probably going to uncover some of this, it wasn't necessarily a profile that leads to a lot of success in the NFL. He did have a lot of design stuff to him, a lot of verticality from the slot, which is usually a red flag for us. The thing that kind of differentiates him between other guys with similar profiles, like a Luther Burden, is that you see the route running. Like it's a fully developed skill set for him. When he does go out on the outside, he is winning with route running and he is separating at an extremely high level. I comped his route running ability to Allen Iverson in the early 2000s. The way he can break a dude's ankles and completely cross him up and just get wide the heck open is uncanny. I think for my money, that quick instant separation where he gives the quarterback the easiest throw, he's the best in the class at that stuff. Better than Matthew Golden, better than Ted McMillan. He's awesome. The real big limitation for him, by the way, is that he's 5'10". And he's not a guy you're going to play on the outside of X wide receiver for 80% of his snaps. Some other notes here: deep press beating toolbox. I thought the reps he got on tape was tremendous. In 2024, he didn't see a ton of press, but in 24, Kansas, Iowa, Miami. If you want references, go watch those game tapes. He got pressed a ton, and he annihilated press in all 3 of those games. He's a football vacuum as well. For being 5'10" with shorter arms, his ability to make last-second adjustments, like off-target throws, and we saw a lot of them from the Iowa State quarterback, was incredible, truly incredible. So that speaks to his ball tracking ability. It speaks to that body control as well. And this is a valuable trait for a guy who's going to primarily play in the slot where there's a lot of traffic. It's a congested part of the field, and he's going to have to be reliable over the middle in those high-stress environments. And then lastly, tough runner with the ball in his hands. I thought he was a really good yak player. Now, he's not a guy who's going to force a ton of misses necessarily, but he's ultra competitive. He's going to fight till every last breath that he has in his lungs. You see it in the return game as well. Really good open field vision where he just finds the crease and he has the juice to absolutely go. Again, not a guy who's not going to juke dudes out and break a ton of tackles, but he is going to be very effective after the catch. Similar, that's honestly similar to Amon-Ra. Amon-Ra was good at breaking tackles, but that's not his main thing. It's vision and burst and ability to take advantage of daylight. So downside is the length and the height issues. I think he can get a little drifty in his route running, so he needs to just hone in those details. I will say this about him too, Scott. When I wrote him up, I do a strengths and weakness section. I've never wrote a longer strengths section for a player. I mean, it's probably like 1,500 words in of itself. So really like him. Do you want to do the analytics red flags with him?
Yeah, I mean, I'll touch on this pretty briefly. Like, one thing I did like about Jaylin Noel was you saw 2 years ago, he was really working as more of an underneath slot. We had a 7.7 ADOT, still had a 2.6 yards per route run. Then last year, ADOT ballooned up to 12.2 yards per route run, again 2.6, a little bit better than the season before. So maybe he's not just a slot only wide receiver at the next level, or maybe at the very least he has a little Tyler Lockett to his game, something like that. So I thought that was interesting. That was one of my pros for him. Cons, obviously, my model devalues slot production relative to production coming out wide, and then you stack him up against Higgins, and Higgins beats him out in a number of regards. So my model, and I think all models in general, really struggle when you have 2 high caliber receivers on the same team. This is what I struggled with Ja'Marr Chase and Justin Jefferson. I knew Ja'Marr Chase was elite. I knew they were both really good. I didn't know they were both elite. It's a lot of the production and efficiency metrics I'm looking at, like yardage, market share metrics, and that's inherently relative to your target competition. And so right now we have 2 unknowns. Until we get drafted, we can't really say for certain how good these players are. And so it just makes things trickier, and it makes it even more tricky when you look at their production. They're like basically mirroring each other so tight, and it's like no one else involved in this offense. So last year, Jaylin Noel, basically 1,200 yards, Jayden Higgins, 1,200 yards. No other Iowa State receiver had over 141. And so, they were the entirety of the offense over the last 2 seasons. I think Higgins ranked second, Noel ranked 7th in receiving yards in the power conferences. So extremely productive. And so then you're left with, to determine how good these players are. It's all right. Now we need to compare them to each other. And to me, it was really Higgins standing out. He had the better yards per route run over the last 2 seasons, 2.8 versus 2.59. And so that's a feather in his cap. It's also the fact that he ran 71% of his routes from out wide. Noel was down at 28%. And so again, my model devalues slot production. And so a nice little hat tip in Higgins' favor. Over the last 2 years, Higgins was more efficient than Noel, both when lined up out wide and from the slot by yards per route run. Higgins is also younger. He's 101 days younger, like a minor aside here. I know it's like 101 days. Noel missed like an important bench, like the cutoff bracket, and Higgins just cleared it. And so if I kept that without any adjustments, really makes Higgins look significantly better. Not a guy who's going to make you miss in terms of missed tackles, and Noel's 0.03 missed tackles forced per reception minus screens ranks worst of any player, running back, wide receiver, tight end in this year's who was invited to this year's combine. One of the worst historically, only had 7. I think Higgins had like 24, which is, a little sus, but you said, maybe that's just not how he wins. And I did kind of make an excuse for him in the sense that he was one of the best big play receivers in football last year. And so, if that's just not how he wins, that's okay with me. But that was, kind of a concern I brought up. You also mentioned quarterback play was awful. I'm seeing that in the data as well. And so with both of them, I mentioned Jaylin Noel. I like to see him win as the short underneath 2 years ago, and then more as an intermediate to deep threat last year. But with Jayden Higgins, like in our Tet McMillan episode, we compared Jayden Higgins. We compared Tet McMillan to Drake London, right? And the thing is, you could just slide Jayden Higgins right in there next to them, and these stack up just about exactly the same. They're all 6'4", 214 to 219 pounds by targets per route run, yards per route run, first downs, etc. They all look exactly the same. And I'll pull up a graphic on the screen here, but really compares favorably. And so this is the red flag on them both from an analytics perspective. I know sometimes it feels like we're talking different languages, Brett, but as good as their production was, I will say that they benefited from personnel. This is something, we talk about a lot in the analytics community, is personnel adjusted yards per route run, expected yards per route run. So they had only 2 wide receivers on the field at one of the highest rates in all of college football. Travis Hunter, one of the lowest. And so that was an argument I would make for him. And yeah, it's just easier to get targets, to rack up yards when you're competing for targets against running backs and tight ends rather than wide receivers. But at the end of the day, like, I do like Higgins more than Noel. I think that's just based on the data. It's hard to argue anything otherwise. And I liked both of them, despite, my model potentially having a bias for 2 unknowns on the same team competing for targets. And because of this personnel adjustment, because without the personnel adjustment, really some of the best, sickest stats in this class. And that's kind of where I'm at. Both are freak athletes. Both ranked in your top 5 according to film study. Both had analytics profiles right around there in a weak class. And so I'm kind of content on this one to really just like lean on you,
Right on. So I love both these guys. I already mentioned I have Noel as my wide receiver 3. Higgins is my wide receiver 5 currently. And I love so much about his game. When I talk about him, you're going to be like, why don't you have this guy higher? So I'll start with, you mentioned the athleticism, right? This is a juiced up X wide receiver profile. The league's kind of starving for these guys right now. It was a dying breed for a while, and now you're seeing a sort of a resurgence. He's a big boy.
What's interesting is I just did a show with Sean Siegel over at Rotoviz, and he was saying, so it is a dying breed, but it's also like, he's saying it's devalued from a fantasy perspective. And I think that is the case if you're not getting like a little bit of big power slot work mixed in there, like we saw last year with, go ahead. Ding, ding, ding. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Ding, ding, ding. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that so that's one thing I would say. And again, with slot wide receiver. So my model, this is a pre-draft model, devalues it, but it's really, it could just be saying not that like slot wide receivers are worth less. It's really just that they're so massively landing spot dependent. And so if Noel gets, equivalent draft capital to a Higgins with like a great landing spot, like a team like the Rams where they live in 11 personnel, or a Sean Payton where you hear him say Joker or Michael Thomas role or slant God or something like that, I'll jack them up in my rankings. But so I did just want to get that out of the way. Go ahead.
So let me address the Noel thing, and I'm going to get back to Higgins. Noel is not a slot only type player to me.
Okay.
I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown plays 50% outside, 50% inside. That should absolutely be Noel's role. You want him in the slot because he's so effective, but he can also survive and live in two wide receiver sets. So, and then back to Higgins, I think he best profiles right now as a power slot. I'll get to that in a minute. But for everything I've said about the other receivers in this class, including Noel, I said Noel's the best route runner right now. I think Higgins actually has the biggest route running upside in the whole class. So when you talk to a Sean Siegel and says that that's the X receiver is devalued, it's not if the guy can run routes. The reason it's been devalued is because those big freak athletes that are good route runners, like the Calvin Johnsons, the Julio Jones of the world, those guys are no longer playing wide receiver. They're playing defensive end. They're playing, defensive tackle and linebacker. The big bodied athletes are getting moved to different positions now. Where Higgins is different is that he is a big body guy who is a freak athlete, and you see this general total body athleticism that's gross. I'm going to read you a little bit about what I wrote about his route running. So first and foremost, this is a guy who has the ability to sink and explode. He can sink his hips, drop his weight down. He could be running full speed and stop on a dime with zero wasted movement, zero extra steps. But he also has extremely flexible ankles and hips to where he can speed roll a dig running full speed to where he doesn't have to slow down at all to run through his break. And what that does, he has two ways he can beat you as a route runner, where most receivers have one, if that. It takes corners out of the frame of mind of playing anticipatory coverage into reactionary coverage. Corners cannot defend him as a anticipatory corner because they literally don't know what's coming. Because Higgins has a variety of ways he can get in and out of his breaks, and he has the athleticism to absolutely crush you through that break. It turns into this reactionary coverage to where now you have to play trail technique. And guess what? You're not, once a 6'4", 215-pound receiver passes you by and separates, you are not recovering on him because he has the frame to box you out. This is a potentially deadly profile for the NFL. So, like I said, I'm going to start talking about him, and you're going to ask me why I don't have him higher as I'm making these claims. I think the underwhelming thing for Higgins' tape is he doesn't know how to get off press right now. And this could be the death nail in his profile if he doesn't pan out in the NFL. And this is why I think for right now, he translates best as a power slot. It's because he does not know how to win against press.
So Jaylin Noel isn't a slot wide receiver, or isn't just a slot wide receiver, but Higgins is, at least in year one.
No, and I think a year in an NFL system, you might be able to teach him that. And then all of a sudden he's a dominant three-position player that is a Joker type, is a Michael Thomas type. I actually comped him to Michael Thomas in my prospect profile of him. So it's ironic that you invoked that name. I do think that his total package, though, gives him an insanely high ceiling to the point where I would say, even though he's my wide receiver 5, if you're drafting players for ceiling only, I would draft him ahead of Jaylin Noel because I think the ceiling is that big. I think I said it on First Read a couple days ago. If he ended up being the best receiver in this class, it would not shock me at all. He has that much potential in his body. It's just a matter of getting on the right team that's gonna pull that out of him.
More upside than a Amon-Ra, you think?
Way more upside than Amon-Ra is just a more detailed player right now.
So this is what I preach is upside wins championships, lean into upside. That's how I built my model to be as well. And like you saying that makes me want to just jack him up in my rankings. That's great to hear. Yeah. Because that's how you need to play it for fantasy. I know some other film evaluators had concerns regarding his ability to separate. Did you not see that?
No, the ability to separate is for sure there. I think sometimes, without saying it, I think sometimes we get too caught up on failing to adjust for context of the situation. Quarterback play was really bad. I think if you look at the way we designed ASS and the separate, I evaluate wide receivers through the same lens. So earned separation opportunities, I thought Higgins was one of the best in the class, and surely not someone who struggles with it. Let's do the dynasty conversation, shall we?
Let's do it.
So we've kind of poo-pooed this wide receiver class in favor of the running back class that we haven't even talked about yet, ironically. But where you're an upside guy, you're going to have Higgins higher than Noel, but where are you starting to look at these two players in dynasty drafts?
I think I had it 6, 7, but there was like a tier between them. You get to my next tier and then you get to Noel, even though they're technically right next to each other. But you kind of make me want to like it went a Amon-Ra, then Higgins, then Noel, but you make me want to move Higgins up even higher. And this is kind of what I said like a couple weeks back. It's just the way it played out when I ran my model, factored in projected draft capital, factored in your film grade and spork score. But yeah, I kind of want to just move Higgins up even higher.
So that was your wide receiver rankings. You have Higgins wide receiver 6?
Yeah.
So that's crazy. I'm actually higher on Higgins than you are.
And I've been pounding the table for this guy for weeks. So maybe that's a mistake.
Yeah, we'll have to take a look at that. But all right, so what, like you're talking mid to late second round then as of right now?
So here's the thing. We've just been like dumping all over these wide receivers and how like they're not attractive bets at cost and how we'd rather just draft a tight end or a running back. But Higgins is like one of the few players, like I love his price and like I'd be happy to draft.
Yeah, I kind of feel that way too, especially the whole upside rant I just gave you. I got to be comfortable. Also, at the end of the day, draft capital is going to matter for the wide receivers. That will help sort out some of the noise, right? Like, I like Jack Betch a lot, but if he goes 2 whole rounds after Jayden Higgins, it's not even be a discussion for me. So, yeah. And then Jaylin Noel, kind of similar spot or a little later for you?
I tier behind Higgins, but like again, there's not a ton of players to like, and like just the fact that you're this high on him, like that matters so much to me, just because you're as good as you are and your hit rate is so strong. So yeah, I not mad at Noel at all. His price tag, I'd be happy to land him, but a lot of that has to do with just kind of your film grade on him.
All right. I think we need to, I want to give the people more substance in that with the draft. So let's do this. I'm going to give you a hypothetical, my favorite thing to do. Hypothetically speaking, Jayden Higgins gets drafted 37th overall to the Las Vegas Raiders. How does that influence your decision making?
I mean, I love that. I think that's a great spot for him, and it's amazing draft capital. And it's, if a Amon-Ra goes behind him, if Golden goes only a few picks earlier, if Igbuka goes within a few picks, Burden goes, a few picks after, let's say, like, I don't know, you could have him wide receiver too. Like that's not insane to me.
Cool. That's what I wanted to hear. All right. Let's get out of here. That's gonna do it for us. We're gonna be back with TCU wide receiver Jack Betch next.